So now we are moving on into data types. So let's clear this out. We are going to discuss about several data types. First, we are going to talk about number and BigInt. So these are both numerical or number related. What's the big difference? Number has a limitation for smaller numbers, not very small, but there is a limit. If it's too large, it will not be accurate. So if you're using huge numbers, like for big data or any operation that involves huge numbers, you might want to use BigInt. We will see what is the difference here. Okay, so for example, how do you define and set the number data type? It's simple. So we can use let my number, which is the variable, equals 10. That's it. So that's how you declare and define a number variable. So if I want to console.log type of my number, we want to say what data type is my number, right? It will say number. So I'm going to save this. Okay, I'm going to save that and I'm going to flip into our site pages, this one, and refresh this. Number. So the type is number. So now, how do you define a BigInt? You basically append the text or the letter n. So whenever you append a letter n onto any number, it says to the JavaScript interpreter on your browser that this is a BigInt type. Okay, so if I save that, so I just add the letter n after the number. Now JavaScript will know that that's a BigInt. See, it's a BigInt. So why, Jimmy? Why there is two? Because when JavaScript was first developed, the internet is not using huge number yet for JavaScript coding. But now as we move into big data and we have like gazillions, in numbering, whatever you want to code, you want to use BigInt for more accuracy. So let's see what's the difference here, okay? So for example, if I want to set the number, right, to that, boom. So there's a huge number, right? So there's this number. So if I console.log, right, you will see what happened here. I'm going to save that. So I just set my number to this value. Now I'm asserting or checking the number. Oh no, I don't want to do the type. I want to actually check the value of my number, right? I'm going to do, what's the value now? If I refresh this, what on earth, right? It's rounding it up. So it's not a 999, oops. It's not this 99999 that we set. It changes to 10. And then however many zeros there. Alright? So that is concerning, right? When you're coding, it just changes the number like that, right? So if you say this is a BigInt, it will stay like that. Now if I flip back and I refresh, see? Now it's way more accurate. So what if you're comparing the number? Because the number changes like so. If we flip back, so if I just do like that. I'm gonna console.log, okay, actually I'm gonna do this, let number1 equals, so number1 I'm gonna paste this big number, okay, second number equals is a different number, it ends with 3, okay, so is it different? Yes, it's different, right? So if I compare this, okay, is number1 equals number2? Do you think it will be true or false? It should be false because this is not the same number. Should be false, but is it false? That's the question. So I just save that and I flip back and you see, boom, it's true. That is incorrect. So that is a bug. So you don't want to use comparison, right, with just a number type. You want to compare a big number like that with a big int, so it's accurate. So if I put an n, that means we're telling the JavaScript this is a big number, so compare it accurately, right? Now if I compare these two, it's gonna say it's false. All right, so if I flip back there and I refresh, false, which is correct because that is false, right? So because what happens if I even delete that and I just do console.log number1 and console.log number2 and save that, it will print out the same number. It will round up 1. So if I refresh, see, that is not right. It's not right because it's different number, but because it's the number what the data type of number, it's treating it as the same because the number data type does not support a big number like that. Therefore, you would want to make sure this is a big int, this is a big int. Then when you actually access the value, it's going to access the correct value there. If I refresh, boom. Right? So that's very important. Okay. Okay, now we can move on. You know what's the difference between big int and number. So advice, if you're working with smaller numbers, it's safe to use just number, meaning you don't have to use an n. But if you know your code is actually accessing big chunk of numbers there, you would want to add an n in the end, telling JavaScript that's a big int, dude. Treat that as a big int. Don't mess up my code. Okay? Okay. Moving on, we're going to do string. Wow, that's pretty straightforward, right? Okay, let's put let movie title The Simpsons. So when you set or declare a string, you can use double quotes, right, or single quotes. Let movie title to The Godfather. Now if I go console.log type of movie title 1, console.log type of movie title 2, both should print out string. Okay, if I flip back here and just refresh this, oh, undefined, this, did I mistype something? I think I do. Movie title, oh, it's not 1, it's just movie title. Okay, which will bring us to the next one, which is undefined. So now both the type of string, right? So now we can even do console.log movie title, console.log movie title 2. So as we do this, please code along. You watch my video on one screen and you code along on another screen. Don't just watch the video and assume you get it, because without typing with your own 10 fingers and actually typing it in, it will not stick to your brain. Got it? You have to type this up and just follow along. So if I save that, I'm going to flip back and refresh. So now it's accessing the value. Pretty straightforward. Okay. So I'm going to clear this out. Let's talk about Boolean. So what's Boolean? Boolean is a true or false data type. So let person, or not person, is holiday, for example. Is it a holiday today? Right? It is not, so it's false. So if I want to check the data type, console.log is holiday, save that and flip here, it's false. No, I want to type off. I want to type off is holiday. So you know the data type is Boolean. Boolean is the data type and the value is false. So it's just either true or false. You can't wrap it in a quote. Don't do that, because this will become a string. Okay, so don't wrap it in a quote or double quote. So if I refresh this, that becomes a string. So if you want to check true or false on your logic, on your coding, leave it like that without double quotes or without single quotes. All right, that's pretty straightforward. Let's move on. Next up is an object. So take that out, object. So object, let my object equals, it's defined by curly brackets like that. So now if I console.log type of my obj, this will say object. If I refresh this, boom, that's an object. Okay, we will play a lot with object, but I won't explain examples here because I will make one specific video just to talk about object. So I want to also mention an array is also an object. Okay, my array, which is represented by this, right? And then my array, that's also an object. So if I flip back here and refresh, that's also an object. So I want to discuss about array and object on a separate video on its own. So now this is just discussing data type. So let's move on. The next one is symbols. So let's take this out. Symbol. So let, for example, user ID. Okay, let user ID equals symbol with a capital S. Okay, symbol, and you can define this user ID. So this defines that the user ID as a data type symbol. So if I console.log type of user ID, it will print symbol on here. It's a symbol. So what on earth is this for? Why do you need to do this? Good question. So JavaScripts can include other JavaScript library, right? Like any other programming languages, you can include other files or other libraries to work on your code. Okay? So, example, if you're including other JavaScript libraries in your code, you include it in your HTML to include other JavaScript libraries, and those libraries also are using the user ID variable. If you don't use symbol, right, and you just set the user ID, it will conflict with one another. So symbol is used to make sure that your variable will be unique. Okay, I don't want to discuss too deep about this at this moment. It'll just be overwhelming, and we're just discussing data type on the surface. So basically, you can understand that's the use or the usage of the symbol data type. It's to make sure it's always unique. So when you're accessing user ID here, it's always going to be your user ID, not some other code's user ID. Got it? Because a lot of libraries will be using this very common variable name, right? So you don't want it to be conflicting with your code. That's why you use symbol to make sure this user ID is unique to your code. So it's safe when you're accessing the value of it. Okay, I don't want to be too complicated give an example of this particular data type. We'll do that later on. All right, now let's move on. Okay, let's clear this out. Now, last but not least is null or undefined versus null. So when you declare a variable and you do not set a value, it will become undefined data type. So if, for example, I do let movie title, that's it. I didn't set a value, right? Now if I go console.log, we haven't initiated any value. So type of movie title, what is it? JavaScript don't know. Is this a string? Is this a number? Is this a BigInt? What is this? We never set the value. If I set like that, it will become a number, right? If I set the Simpson, it will become a string. If I set and it will become a BigInt, right? If I say that, it will become an object. If I say that, it will become an object. Array is an object. But if I don't say anything, what? I don't know about that. JavaScript says that's undefined. So let's see. If I save that and just flip back and refresh, undefined. We have not defined what on earth is this. It's just the name, but we don't know what will it be because it's not defined yet. Okay? So now, if I want to set a value which is blank or null, like so, null becomes an object. It's supposed to be fixed, but the JavaScript consortium will not fix that because there are trillions of codes already written. If they simply just change how it should be treated, it will mess up a lot of codes already written by so many people. So null becomes or still is treated as an object. It's supposed to be null, not an object. But it's a long story. You can Wikipedia search it. Why is that so? But basically, the big difference is if you never set anything on a variable, it is going to be undefined. But if you want to set a variable to blank it out, always set it to null. Okay? Never do undefined like so. Null it. Okay, same thing with Salesforce. You null it. You nullify the value. Got that? Okay. Okay, let's now talk about comparing values of these variables. You saw me before using these three equal sign, and then there is 2 equal sign. What is the difference? So let's say it's strict comparison versus just normal comparison. Okay, so 2 equals just comparing normally. So if I do console.log, the number 1, is it equal the number 1? Yes, true or false? It will be true because 1 equals 1, right? Even though the data type, this is number and this is string, if I flip back here, it's going to say true. 1 equals 1. But if I say triple equals, this will also compare the data type. So this is the data type number, right? This is the data type string. So it will be false. Like so, false. So in LWC development, we always do strict comparison. So our code is more bug-free. We don't want to, come across bugs because we are leniently comparing values like so. Like for example, 1 and a BigInt, this will pass as well. Okay, if I flip there, it's going to say true. But if I change this to triple, now it's going to say false. Because 1 is number, 1 is BigInt. So if I refresh that, it's going to say false. Okay? Okay. So, last one, that's a tricky one, is comparing between null and undefined. So, be careful there. So, when you're coding LWC, comparing null and undefined, be careful comparing those. For example, let my contact ID, okay, equals, or just that. I'm going to define it. Okay, and now let, or maybe first contact ID, second contact ID equals null. So this we set it's blank. This we haven't set anything. So this is undefined. This is null. So if I console.log first contact ID, is it equal second contact ID? You guess. It's not comparing data type. It's going to say true because both is pretty much blank. But because it's not comparing the data type, right? It's going to be true. Let's just save that and see for yourself. True. So now if I say strict compare it, okay, it's going to be false because this is not even initialized. It's not null. It's not even initialized yet. Doesn't have any value. So this is undefined. This is null. So this will become false. There you go. So that's the foundation of data types for JavaScript, which we will be using as a foundation when we build up our LWC codes and components. So please do replay this video at least a couple of times, and please do like and subscribe. Anyways, repeat this and follow along with your 10 fingers. Type it, code it, understand these data types. Okay? You have to get the mindset, you have to understand it. Then when we develop together, you're not going to be scratching your head. What just happened there? Why is it that way? Because you haven't do the foundation correctly. Okay? If you're building a skyscraper and the foundation is not super strong and solid, it will crumble. Like the building in Florida. Remember in the news? It crumbled after a few years. I don't know how many years, but that's really bad. We don't want that ever happening. So make sure your foundation is pretty solid. It's unshakable. Get this, understand this, important stuff. Okay? Repeat it a few times, and I'll see you on the next video. Bada bing, bada boom. Hit that subscribe button and explore new Trailhead grounds and learn to implement the most useful and popular apps on the Salesforce App Exchange. And do yourself a favor, like this video, and you'll be surprised on how much more you understand when watching this same video after liking it. Don't take my word. Watch this one more time after you like the video and see it for yourself. Bada bing, bada boom.